Hello there, my name is Kevin Silva from Aquarius History, and I'm here to teach you about World War I and the events that led up to it. First off, we have the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. This cutie pie was heir presumptive to the Austro-Hungarian throne, and his wife Sophie was the Duchess of Hohenberg. On June 28, 1914, in what would be modern-day Bosnia, they were assassinated by Gavrilo Princip. Princip was a member of the Black Hand Group, which was a underground secret society which was mainly made up of Serbians who did not like the Austro-Hungarian meddling in the Balkan region. The political objective of the assassination was to break off Austria-Hungary's southern Slav provinces so they could later be combined into a Yugoslavia. Yugoslavia means southern Slav, and in essence the political objective of the assassination was met, as after World War I, Yugoslavia was indeed formed. The assassination motives were consistent with a movement that later became known as Young Bosnia. The assassination led directly to the First World War when Austria subsequently issued an ultimatum to the Kingdom of Serbia, which was partially objected because the Austrians wanted the Serbians to look for the Black Hand members, but the Serbians said no, but they agreed to all the other ultimatums, which was basically like take down Austro-Hungarian propaganda which demonized them. But because still they got declared on. Some say they deserve it, some say they don't. It really just depends on what side of history you want to look at it on, because they didn't really have to take out Franz Ferdinand. I've read before that he wanted to make reforms on the social political structure of Austria-Hungary, which would make it sort of like department type of system, where he would separate the Austro-Hungarian kingdom into different regions, which were dominated by ethnic groups. Though this aside, my little tangent, he never got to do this, and because of that, they win a war. You might be thinking to yourself, Kevin, why the beef? Why did they have to do Austria's boy Franz Ferdinand dirty like that? Well, the truth is, the history of relations between the two states were dominated by tension over Serbian ethnic claims over the regions such as Bosnia and Herzegovina, as well as Serbian sympathy for other southern Slav minorities in the Habsburg Empire. This, combined with Austrian and Hungarian fears of Pan-Slavism and the Russian influence, increased tensions between the two, which could not be repaired or decreased after the assassination of Franz Ferdinand, thus starting World War I after Austria declared war on Serbia for not following all of their demands. Despite the Serbians following out almost all of them, I suppose it wasn't enough for Austria, who was just itching for revenge. And his revenge would come soon enough. On July 28, 1914, 1 month to the day after Archduke Franz Ferdinand was assassinated, Austria-Hungary declares war on Serbia, effectively beginning the First World War. Threatened by the Serbian ambition in the tumultuous Balkan regions of Europe, Austria-Hungary was determined that the proper response to the assassinations was to prepare for the possible invasion of Serbia. After securing the unconditional support of his powerful ally Germany, the Austrian government broke diplomatic relations with Serbia on July 25th and went ahead with military preparedness measures. Meanwhile, alerted to the impending crisis, Russia, Serbia's own mighty supporter in the Balkans, began its initial steps towards military mobilization against Austria. You might be wondering why the Russians would support the Serbians, even though they're so far apart. The answer is that both of them are Slavic nations, and at the time Pan-Slavism was something that was rising in popularity within the Balkan and other Slavic regions of Europe. The Russian interests in Serbia may have seemed to be in the primarily retention and expansion of right of navigations through the Dardanelles, territorial expansion at the expense of the declining Ottoman Empire, creating reliable client states to contend with the two major regional rivals, Austria and Turkey, under the guise of Pan-Slavism or protecting Orthodox Christians. The Russians would have been keen to avoid the repeat of the disastrous defeat of the Crimean War, which lost them the right to host warships in the Black Sea. The Russians also viewed the Balkan states as a buffer against Austrian influence. This is why they supported Serbia in the weeks following and leading up to the outbreak of World War I. The Tsar had also long held designs on Constantinople and the Bosphorus, which would further serve as a bulwark against incursions from powers like Britain, whom was the greatest geopolitical rival. The Russians also slowly dismembered the Ottoman control of southern Eastern Europe as part of their aims to reduce the Ottoman Empire to that of a petty vassal state. Thus, we can conclude that the Russian Balkans policy was driven by a goal of territorial expansionism and imperial ambition, thus explaining why the Serbians received Russian support and why the Russians were so keen on invading Austria for the invasion of Serbia. Little did the Russians know, their invasion of Austria would bring in their German ally. The Germans were essentially looking for a fight this whole time, though they had no justification, but with the Russian intervention in the war, this allowed the Germans to unleash their might against the might of Russia. When Austria invaded Serbia to punish it for the support of the terrorist movement held responsible for the murder of Ferdinand, the Archduke, mind you, Tsar Nicholas of Russia ordered his army to mobilize only against Austria. To be told that wasn't possible, however, there was no plans for such an operation. It was either to mobilize or not. The typical Russian inefficiency, eh? Well, we shall see. The Tsar opted for mobilization, which meant that his troops would be assembling at the border with Germany as well as that of Austria. That faced Kaiser Wilhelm with a problem. Up to now, the French hadn't moved because, of course, when Germany declared war on Russia, France got involved because they're still mad about losing the Franco-Prussian War, but that's a topic for another day. Consequently, he ordered von Moltke, the nephew of and therefore appointed to the position of Chief of Staff of the army, to mobilize against Russia only. To receive the same answer as his cousin Tsar was not possible. The super efficient Germans had the same mistake as the bumbling Russians. There's no plans for partial mobilization. The whole plan was finely crafted clockwork, and to alter said plan would have been disastrous. Once the order was given, the trains would start to run accordingly to schedule that had been tightened with the extreme possible level with no deviation possible. To be fair to Wilhelm, in those circumstances he really didn't have much of a choice. He simply could not ignore an army mobilizing on his frontier. Alright, now with the big boys out of the picture, let's talk about the little boys. You know, the Balkans. The Balkan campaign of World War I was fought between the Central Powers represented by Austria-Hungary, Bulgaria. Yep, you heard it here, boys. Bulgaria was in the Central Powers. They were also in the Axis in World War II, but it really seems like nobody really cares what Bulgaria does. Also, the Ottoman Empire was there as well. They were against the Allies, which was represented by France, Montenegro, Russia, and Serbia, as well as the United Kingdom, and later Romania and Greece, who sided with the Allied powers. Alright, let's talk about the first campaign. Serbia against Austria. Well, you would think that Austria would just steamroll over them, but let's just say that the first campaign wasn't really successful for Austria, due to the fact that they kind of marched right into a Serbian artillery training field and got blown to hell. Nevertheless, in the end, the Serbians were driven away from their actual homeland and were stationed in Greece for whatever reason. Next up was the Romanian-Austrian War, which basically meant that the Hungarians within Austria kind of curb stomped the Romanians. I'm sorry to oversimplify it, but over half of the Romanian army was lost. And after Russia pulled out of the war because of their whole communist revolution, they kind of sued for peace after Wallachia and other regions of Romania were conquered. That didn't mean that they were out of the count. For after Bulgaria got knocked out of the war, Romania re-entered on November 10th, 1980. Alright, so this piece was meant for like the next video, but since it's part of the Balkan War, I have to mention that the Italians were there too. Though I'm going to talk about why they got into the war in the next video, but let's just say that the Albanian region was quote-unquote saved by Italy during that time period. So that's the end of the video. Part 2 will come out soon enough. I'm pretty sure by the time my project's due for this, I'm gonna have part 2 come out. So yeah, peace out. Keep hydrated, Aquarius. Yeah, bro.